Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey everyone, guess what? We made it to Friday. Oh my. If this week was for you, similar to what it was for me, then I know you're glad to be here at this juncture. So I'm happy that you're spending some time, a little time with us. I'm really excited about tonight's show. Before I get to it, though, I just want to remind you to become a member of the KGRADB family by joining our website. And the way you do that is to go to live.kgradb.com. And for a monthly membership, use the code VISION. For an annual membership, use the code VISION22, please. That'll help us out here at Night Vision. It'll help the station out. I know you want to support it because we have some of the greatest paranormal and alternative programming on KGRA. So please join us. Also, if you're not ready to become a member, or whether or not you're ready to become a member, go to the kgradb.com website and sign up for our newsletter. It's completely free, or sign up for our mailing list, I should say, because that will entitle you then to receive our monthly newsletter with articles and events and information. So check that out if you would, please. But I'm truly excited because our historian is back. James Martin is back. So you know what that means. It's Templar time. I'm not going to delay this any longer. Going to get James on because we've got a lot to cover. Hey, James.
James Martin is here today. James, where are you?
Yeah, where are you indeed?
Well, indeed. So, good to be back, everyone. Looking forward to the show. And
it's been a little while. We've missed you terribly.
Yeah, and I've missed everyone too. But always very busy. Lots of different things going on. So, it's good to be back. And I am wearing a bit of my clan tartan and all of this.
Right. It's difficult to see, but I see it now that you pointed it out. I want to remind everyone while I'm thinking about it that to go to Amazon.com and look for Uncharted by Tim Wallace Murphy and James Martin. And also want to remind everybody that coming down the line is a series of 3 books covering the entire history, everything you ever imagined to know about the Knights Templar and more. So looking forward to those coming out. I know, I guarantee you those are going to be part of your legacy. Those are going to be used from now on in terms of, research and reference and everything else. So I'm really excited about it. No one's really undertaken this in quite this way. So it's going to be something, for everybody's libraries that's interested in the Knights Templar.
And chipping away at it weekend by weekend. So, yes.
Yeah,
if anyone wants to know what
day jobs, unfortunately.
Well, yeah. If anyone wants to know what I'm up to this weekend, Renee's just giving you a big clue.
Yeah.
Chipping away at further research and all this. But yeah, first book is around the origins of the Knights Templar, and really going back to ancient Rome and looking at some of the, how did the Templars later end up rising, and here were some of the characters that they were later venerating, etc. And I have to say, as an historian, even I have been surprised. I mean, research over the past 6 years for this book, look, you think you've got some things sussed. No. I don't know. The research sort of finds you in this way also. So, yeah, it's a pleasure to write, I have to say. So
by going back, because I know that might throw a few people off, that you're saying, you're beginning in Rome to write the story of the Templar origins. So what you're saying is you're going back to the conditions that were present that fostered the development of the Knights Templar.
Yeah,
they came into being, literally.
Yeah, and so looking at the order of magnitude, which is the working title of book one, it really is looking at, well, I'm not there to tell the story of Jesus Christ. If you want that story, I would invite you to look at the numerous books about him. But instead, well, quite a lot of the relics, quite a lot of the reasons why Christianity didn't really take a foothold in Europe for quite some time is because of Rome. I mean, without Rome, you wouldn't have had Constantine and the emperors that succeeded him. You wouldn't have had Constantine's mother, Helena, who was very interested, although not Christian. She's venerated by Christians. Again, trying to find evidence of this conversion. She's very interested in this religion. So, what's all of that about? Plus, some interesting things. For example, the third temple in Jerusalem. That's right, the third. It depends on your perspective, I guess. But the rebuilding, shall we say, of the temple in Jerusalem was actually commissioned, designed, had an architect, and began by a Roman emperor. And I think history has forgotten that. And, if you want to at least scratch the surface, then I'd invite you to look up someone called Julian the Apostate, who commissioned it all, and, see where your own research. But yeah, this isn't a book of opinions. It's a book of sourced fact, and it's not. I'm not taking a viewpoint on particular things. Just presenting as best I can the facts of the situation, and perhaps things that have been lost a little bit to history,
as so many things have. We need to resurrect. We have a lot of suppression of history. I'm assuming in the world, but certainly in the United States. I was just watching a news program yesterday that Martin Scorsese, the amazing producer director in Hollywood, he's made a film about Native Americans, which was shot in Oklahoma, around where I grew up, and with the Osage people, and using local people as actors, so it's very authentic, and they're speaking in Osage, the Osage language, but it's a very popular film, getting a lot of accolades. And his thing is, I want to tell something about the real history. It's not going to be always pretty in terms of, certain groups that might be trying to suppress it, but it's real, and we need to know our history so that we can learn from it.
Well, yeah. History doesn't have left or right wing opinions.
No, it
Um,
just is.
it just is. Yeah. It's there for us to learn from.
It's just informative. That's it. And
And that's it. And I'd just say yet again, I think wow, every time I'm on the show, I seem to say this, but we can't look at history through today's glasses. We've got to try our best, and it's difficult. It's really difficult to imagine ourselves back then and appreciate that what is normal and horrific for us was common for people then. It's only because of, I think we were talking about slavery, for example. It's really difficult for us, and it's so upsetting that the idea that some person owns another person. In today's world, we find it abhorrent, and yet for some, a few centuries, if not more, in so-called Western culture, that's what happened. And
I mean, to be fair, it still goes on.
Oh, of course, modern slavery is the scourge of our times.
It's just looks a little different than it did back then, and it's more hidden, but it still goes on.
We find it very difficult to look back and I do a lot of genealogy with listeners and other people, and one of the biggest upset, mainly with American people that I've worked with, you find it really difficult when they find a slave owner. Well, yeah, we don't apologize or try and make excuses, but what we do is they thought it was perfectly normal. What we should do, in fact, is celebrate those pioneers who changed their minds and gave us our views today. But yeah, it's difficult to look back in time, and I think the show that's coming up ahead, which involves Plantagenets, Renee.
Boy.
Is also, I mean, I don't know if you want to share your view on the Plantagenets.
Well, I mean, we were talking, about the Plantagenets last night, and I said that, anytime that, they come up, it's like I get this kind of dark feeling, and, the term or the feeling that comes up in terms of the Plantagenets for me is ruthlessness. And I mentioned that to you, and you said, well, they were ruthless. And I have this image of of the tarot, I guess it's the Knight of Swords that's, charging forward. And I guess that's not too far off from how they really were.
Yeah, exactly. They were, and the people who worked for the Plantagenets, the name comes from Plantagenesta, quite literally a plant, from an area of Anjou in France. They are, by today's standards, ruthless, absolutely ruthless. They, the thing that marked them out is, I mean, they really start in the period we're going to be talking about, William Marshall. Well, William Marshall's dad, who is John Marshall, fought for Empress Matilda, who married into the Anjou family and really gave birth to the Plantagenets, as we know. And these people, you've got to bear in mind, the Roman Empire gave ordinary people, who had at least money, access to a varied diet. By this period in the 12th century, in the 1100s, most of us workers didn't have access to food. I mean, if you lived near the coast, brilliant, you had fish and all of this, but the diet was such that we were shorter as people.
Yeah.
And yet the Plantagenets, I was just trying to get these figures before we came on air, Renee, and unfortunately, I'm just going to have to rely on memory here, but I don't recall that there was a Plantagenet king that was shorter than 6 foot.
Wow.
And if you consider someone like Richard the Lionheart, who's I think 6'3" from memory, versus a population that, absolutely, and I also think that's a little bit. Some people talk about giants in the Americas. Well, again, were they, or did they have a good diet? And all of this. So, these people were quite literally giants of the time. They were the Plantagenets were a royal dynasty, exceptionally tall and prone to exceptional mood swings. The one thing you could perhaps characterize
mood swings.
Yeah, they were renowned for their anger.
Were they bipolar?
Well, it's quite possible, or yeah, it's possible. But just to set the scene for everyone, you've got to bear in mind life expectancy. Life expectancy isn't 70, 80, 90. There are some kings who make it that far, but by and large, them and their retinue die within their 30s and 40s.
Mm-hmm.
The prime is when they're teenagers. And if you think back, I quite like to say to people, when people say, "Oh God, you remind me so much of when I was your age," and there's a big smile. It's funny how they don't say a moody teenager, a spoilt brat, someone who was kicking off and, and all of this. But if you imagine that, imagine a period where water is unsafe to drink. So the best thing to drink is beer or wine. Couple that in with you're a teenager and still just getting, post-puberty, and then being expected to go into battle or run a country.
Yeah, take on huge
and all of this, and you wonder why it is that this explosion of warfare. I tend to think the mood swings are more to do with that.
With immaturity,
with immaturity than necessarily a mental health condition, although there are definite 100% conditions that we can identify with today.
Wow. Now, you mentioned, we're going to be talking about William Marshall, who was a knight and purportedly sort of took the vows of the Knights Templar near his death or on his deathbed, something like that, but had been known as what was termed an errant knight before that. So aside from the fact that he happens to be in your family line,
Well, cheers for bringing that up, Renee. It's almost like we're doing a show about a family member, but yeah, okay, fair enough.
So what is it about William Marshall that made him stand out?
What other than being a relative? No, well,
we'll give him credit for that, at least.
It was a relative. You've just said a errant knight or knight errant, however. Quite often, these knights you will find in romantic literature of the time. We see this with Arthur, and the Knights of the Gawain and the Green Knight and things like this. Okay, firstly, errant in this capacity means something like a wandering or roving
Yeah.
knight. In other words, would turn up for tournaments at various courts. In this way, and really for me, the thing that brought to my attention the importance of William Marshall is that he became a Knight Templar. We're not on about a Templar, someone who works for the order, but he became a Knight Templar on his deathbed, and it's relatively unusual. And
Now, I'm wondering, because obviously we know that he was married.
Yeah.
Was his wife still alive? Are you able to take the oath if you're married?
Well, yes, you are. I mean, the key thing is there were a lot of knights in this period who are married, end up having children, and then joining the order. The idea of chastity and all of the rest of it. Yes, that is. These are essentially monks with arms. Yes, you can be married, but on the proviso that you give up all of your worldly possessions to the order. So there are many examples. I mean, just near the village of Rennes-le-Château, there was a knight, Guillaume de Barry, pardon me. Literally, the name meaning something like William of the neighborhood, who's a Templar knight based in Campan-sur-Aude, who is married. Now, again, the order in some places, it's perhaps wrong of us to assume that this was and perhaps the reason for its downfall. It didn't really have a really unified structure. There are some places where we know that the order had preceptors, men, preceptrix, women. Whether there is there are examples of men and women both running different functions within a Templar preceptory. Remember, the word commandery that we associate is really to do with the hospitaller, all of this. But I suppose the nearest equivalent, the commander and commandress, I suppose. But yeah, so there are examples of it. And the example of Guillaume de Barry, his wife takes in a Cathar knight, and of course, rubbishing the notion that the Templars had nothing to do with the Cathars. But for William Marshall, it's interesting because he clearly had Templar sympathies before he's then sworn in, apparently on his deathbed. There are many examples, not just from his actions in the Holy Land, but then more recently, where we have, I think that the last time I was on the show, and to my memory at least, I was talking about a recent, or at least part of it, a recent article, a discovery, I should say, up around Hereford. In England, namely a number of graves that were belonging to the Knights Templar in a church where the stained glass, from memory at least, included that of William Marshall and his wife Isabel de Clare. And there were plenty of effigies found within that church. I regret to say I haven't any further updates on this, but it really was quite an eye-opener that, why would you have a church that was commissioned for building by the Earl of Pembroke, as his title was, the first of it, he wasn't the first Earl of Pembroke. This was another creation, as it were. But he was known as the first Earl of Pembroke. Why would he commission a church and then permit Templars to be entombed there if he didn't already have some sympathies?
And why do you think? I mean, I realize it requires a little bit of speculation, but why do you think that? Because apparently, obviously he did have Templar sympathies. He was a knight. Why do you think that he didn't take the vows earlier, if indeed it would have been allowed?
Yeah. So I mean, let's just have a look at his birth, if we can. So, his exact birth date isn't recorded. He's born either in 1147 or 1146, probably at some point between the two dates.
Yeah.
The beginning of 1146 to the end of 1147, effectively 2 years. It's somewhere in that period. And again, just for some context, we need to bear in mind that if you're the firstborn son, your job is essentially to inherit. If you're the second born, usually you're offered to the church. Third, essentially to anything else. So if we just keep that in mind, it shouldn't be too surprising when I then say that if we accept, say, 1146, he's born, and he's born as the second born son of John the Marshal.
Right.
So William Marshal gets his name from a title which essentially became the Marshal from the French Maréchal. And the Marshal was originally responsible for, along with constables of castles, etc., but essentially for Maréchal, that shall maybe get its part from chivalric, in other words, to the horse. But anyway, the Marshal was responsible for the monarch's horses and stables and any connected military operation with that. And whilst in today's world we perhaps don't expect to see a cavalry detachment going into war, in the height of the medieval period, well, the horse and cavalry are the equivalent of our tanks today. So, I mean, that's the first thing. So, William Marshal gets his surname from his dad, who is called John the Marshal,
Right.
who's Marshal of England. So, if we understand that. So, he's the second born to John the Marshal, and someone called Sybil, his mother. And his mother.
Right. I wanted to know more about her. I did see that last night, and I thought, I bet she's interesting.
Yeah, well, she's the sister of someone called Patrick, who's the Earl of Salisbury, or Old Sarum, as it used to be called. And again, some of William Marshal's ancestors are very intriguing. But I suppose what we've just got to understand about William is, firstly, because he's the younger son, he's not in line to inherit any of his dad's titles. So he's not expected to inherit any earldoms or any bits of land. Essentially, he's spare part. So, was he to go to the church, or was he to become a knight, as the third son was? And essentially, that's the key thing with the Templars. They occupy both spaces. They are religious warriors. It's Renee. Let me just bring it back into today's world. I remember watching I'm sure it was an American TV show with Steve, a nun, or Steve the nun with a gun, as I remember, and it was some Father Something Investigates or something like that. I can't remember. If you can help me if you're listening to this and you can help me with, it was Father Dowling Investigates.
Father Dowling, that's British.
Oh, it was an American show. But anyway, there was this nun with a gun in this TV show. And really, that is the modern day equivalent of the Knights Templar. They were, as knights, both expected to go into battle, plus to occupy monastic orders. So it's perhaps that you can see from an early age that there is some attraction with this and with family expectations. However,
I'm sorry, was it Warrior Nun?
Oh, I can't think. I really will. I think it was called Father Dowling or something like this, but I'll have to really check. Obscure reference, and
Okay.
just at the age of 35, this was something that was played on repeat. I think it was a 70s or 80s show, but anyway. So yeah, William ends up, there's an expectation to go into the church or in some sort of knighthood, I suppose. But he is sent off to Tankerville in Normandy,
Right.
where he essentially becomes. He's trained up to become a knight, and he is eventually knighted in 1167. Now, he's born in perhaps 1146, so he's 20 or 21. And to be a knight means you have a retinue, you command a force of people. So this is exceptionally young by today's standards.
Right.
He's eventually appointed as the head of the military household, again, Marshal, by someone called Prince Henry. And he is the youngest son of King Henry II. Now, it is said, and it is true, that William Marshal was servant to 5 English kings. So let me explain. You have Henry II, firstly. Now, Henry II is exceptionally associated with the Knights Templar. He was a fervent supporter, as I think it was his dad. He was, relation, whatever, through his mom, in Henry I, who was born in Selby. And, there is a relationship with Henry I and II in terms of their support for the Knights Templar as the order had just been established in whichever year we accept. He then serves Henry II's son, who is crowned king while his father, Henry II, is still on the throne. And that's unique in English history. There isn't another example of it.
Why did that happen?
Without getting into the full ins and outs, it was a practice if your son was rebellious or there was some uncertainty about the succession.
Oh.
How to bring someone on side. I'll make you king while I'm alive.
Right. Huh.
And we must bear in mind that England is under the Plantagenets. You have the Kingdom of England here. In fact, let me show you a picture of some of William Marshal's castles. You have the Kingdom of England, but England is part of what's called the Angevin Empire, which also occupies all of Aquitaine in France, Normandy, and various other places.
Now, that Tankerville castle, is it's still quite a large part of it standing, right?
Yes, there is, and I would invite anyone who's in Normandy to or planning a trip to go there.
Have you been there?
I haven't actually been into the castle. I have driven past it, and actually wanted to stop, and unfortunately, I couldn't find anywhere to park.
Oh,
So it's always the problem in France.
yeah.
But,
I mean, I wonder if we shouldn't add that to one of our tour itineraries. You know, which, you know, maybe I should mention. We do have a tour coming up in the spring. It's already booked, fortunately for us and them, and unfortunately for anybody that might be wanting to come along. But we're planning a couple more tours, and they'll be largely along the Templar trails, Templar tours in France and Spain, and then up through the UK. So watch out for those. We'll be talking about those on this program and also on our website at, there you go, newrennies.org. So if you're interested in going, you can also send us an email right there at info@newrennies.org. So we'll be putting up information shortly about some of those upcoming tours and events. But anyhow, yeah, I'd love to go there. I'd love to add it, you know.
yeah, and it's instrumental, Tankerville and the family, de Tankerville, in the Norman invasion of England. I mean, just carrying on with, as I say, William Marshall, you know, it's Henry II. You've got his son, who's called Henry the Young King. You've got Richard I, King John, and then finally Henry III, who was John's son. Now, one of the, without just skipping ahead and you know, just looking how much time's left on the clock, one of the things that we should just note is that the notion of him being trained up in Tankerville is one thing, and the fact that he was an errant knight going to tournament and all of this was another. But actually, it's that building up of his prestige that sent when Henry's son died, you know, the young king, he built up such a close relationship with him that he ends up asking the Henry II whether he can take the young king's cross over to Jerusalem. In other words, undertake a pilgrimage, perhaps for his soul or something like that. And so Marshall ends up spending just over 2 years then fighting for the King of Jerusalem, who he was Guy de Lusignan. And I think anyone who is familiar with some of the films around Crusaders, this name shouldn't be too alien to you. So what we can say for certain is that at a very young age, we end up with 2021, something like this, that there is almost certainly, when Marshall ends up in the Holy Land, he is interacting with the Templars who are based there. And I think that is where the relationship with the Knights Templar begins. He gets trained up and essentially meets some kindred spirits then in the Holy Land. Now, trying to obtain absolute evidence around this is somewhat difficult, but we can only make an assumption with that. Now, I mentioned earlier that he wasn't granted any lands by his father. He wasn't entitled to inherit. However, when he returns from the Holy Land, he is given a vast amount of estates. And perhaps I'll just bring the map back up. So for those who watching this, you'll be able to see the map of these are castles under Marshal's jurisdiction. Unfortunately, the map also neglects one part of the country that matters a lot to me, which is Cumbria. Because more intriguingly, William Marshal also ends up founding the abbey or the priory, which was already extant in 680 AD and was founded by the monks from Lindisfarne. However, it was refounded, I think is probably the word I'm looking for, in 1189 by William Marshal. And Cartmel has many strong relations with a lot of Templars, which I wish we had a little bit longer to go into, but I'm not sure that we perhaps can. So
you're saying there was a Cumbrian presence, and
there was a Cumbrian presence. There is only one Templar preceptory in Cumbria, which is some distance away from Cartmel. This is Temple Sowerby, but Cartmel Priory and then another Cistercian site nearby the town of Barrow, or Barra as it's known. There are a lot of Templar references, shall we say, if no preceptory.
And why do you think Cumbria wasn't on that map? Is because there wasn't a castle there, or
it's a very difficult geography to traverse. Even today, it's exceptionally rural. And I think was a little bit too difficult. However, we do find some effigies that are in line with some of the other Templar sites around the UK. So I don't think it was important enough to have a preceptory. Almost certainly they had farmsteads. In southern Scotland they did. And if you, just for those who aren't familiar where Cumbria is, you run out of England as you go north. Cumbria is the last stop on the northwest of England, then you hit Scotland.
Right.
And across the border region with Cumbria and Dumfriesshire, there's a lot of Templar sites. So I think that, they didn't have our understanding of the way that we have regions and all of this. I think for them, well, we've got some sites in Scotland. Why would we need anything more in Cumbria? Was how they probably thought of it.
Right. Could have been, yeah.
And those effigies, by the way, I would just say this: if any of you have been on pilgrimage yourself, perhaps prompted by Dan Brown, and have visited Temple Church in London, then you will have already seen the effigy of William Marshal and the person that we're talking about. Now, this almost certainly isn't where he's interred. But that is the effigy. And again, for those who are watching this, I'm just going through some images.
Where do you think he's buried?
Well, in the vicinity, I would suggest.
And what about this idea of, Templars having not, buried in anonymity? Why are there those effigies sort of celebrating these personalities when, we've seen Templar graves that have nothing, no mark, no nothing, no name?
Well, he died I think he died in Oxford, and you've got this effigy. Now, when people die, there's not a team of people very quickly carving away.
Right.
I mean, would that it were. I mean, it'd be a nice thing to find. Oh, William's just died.
I guess that's not really his grave, so it's not really.
So I think I think the carving, and again, I'll just bring it back up for people watching. He almost certainly would have ordered that before he died.
Oh,
As would be the practice, or alternatively, someone did it afterwards, but I would suggest beforehand, and so that is in keeping, by the way, with him becoming a Knight Templar on his deathbed, because well, the carving's already done, so hey,
it still puzzles me. It's why wait till you're on your deathbed.
right.
What would have been
And
the reason not to do it beforehand? Or is it something that, came up when he was close to death and he just thought, well, I'll, take the oath and I'll enter heaven as a Knight Templar.
yeah, and again, let's just come back to a bit of marriage here, because William is bestowed to, I think her name is Helwaz, and she's very much Cumbrian, by the way. Sorry, I said married. He was betrothed, at least, and that marriage never went through. It was then with Isabel de Clare. Now, again, we've got to come. Where did that come about? How did he end up with, the de Clare family?
Obviously, it was a good move for him.
Very good move for him, because the de Clare family were the Anglo-Normans who were invading Ireland. Whenever I think of de Clare, I think of the conquest of Ireland by the Normans, or at least the attempt to do so. And of course, the de Clare family have direct marital relations to the High Kings of Ireland. And from there, Brian Boru, the O'Brien. So if you know anyone whose surname's O'Brien, from Brian Boru, High King of Ireland. And of course, through that lineage, you end up with some connections to the likes of Robert the Bruce, and some familial connections with our Sinclair friends,
Right.
and Roslin. However, if I just give a little bit more background on this. So Henry II's son is Richard I, or otherwise known as Richard the Lionheart, who has some Templar connections, and maybe Richard the Lionheart's connections with the Knights Templar was because of an introduction by William Marshall, who was in the Holy Land. And of course, we know Richard Lionheart was absent, if you know the story of Robin Hood or the cartoon, or however you've accessed that. Richard was off on crusade doing noble deeds. The reality was he hated England, and yet remains one of England's most favoured monarchs, despite the fact he hated it and spent no more than 4 months in England. It's so much so that Richard ends up being the person who introduces Isabel de Clare, and she is the daughter of another Earl of Pembroke. We won't get into that, but he's known as the Strongbow. And if we've got any English listeners, Strongbow is a form of cider, and absolutely no connection.
Oh, how funny.
Anyway, so through his connection with Richard, of course, Marshall becomes one of the most powerful barons, leading lights in England, Wales, Pembrokeshire is in Wales, Ireland, and of course in France. And he keeps getting lands bestowed to him. So when Richard Lionheart, he eventually passes away, I think 1199, and we end up with King John, who I have to say, it's very difficult to say anything nice about John. And, you know, again, if you're familiar with the Robin Hood tale, yeah, very difficult also to say anything about the despotic King John. Then what we have to do is begin to look then at one of the control methods for this despot called John, who was taxing everybody left, right, and centre. A very famous, in fact, it was called the Great Charter. I don't know, Renee, if you know what
Magna Carta.
Magna Carta. And this forms the basis, or at least it's alleged, in the United Kingdom and United States for our democratic freedoms. Now, the thing that people don't know about this is that Magna Carta was not written by, some clerk or, it just came into people's heads. Magna Carta was written by the Knights Templar.
Oh, wow.
In the time of William Marshall, who remained loyal to King John, by the way, but I suppose his brethren ended up writing Magna Carta, and I think I got a picture of Magna Carta. Yes, there we are. Just for
wow, look at that.
Yes, if everyone would like to read and translate and submit their translations,
give me 5 minutes
by Monday morning for marking and all of this. This gave some freedoms to people, or at least some liberties and all of this. Sometimes it's known as the Angevin Charter of the Angers. I'll just read part of it for you. No free man shall be seized or imprisoned or stripped of his rights or possessions, or outlawed or exiled, nor will we proceed with force against him except by the lawful judgment of his equals or by the law of the land. To no one will we sell, to no one deny or delay the right of justice. That came from a group of knights that we're interested in on the show called the Knights Templar. Now, there were quite a few problems with the charter. It gave obligations to build no more than 2 bridges for your local lord. But here is something of intrigue, and I appreciate we're running out of time. Yeah. But here is a bit of a shadowy connection with John and the Templars. King John stayed with the Knights Templar the night before he had to place himself in front of the barons to agree this great charter, the Magna Carta. The name of the person he was hosted by was called Amaric, and he accompanied John over to Runnymede, where the charter was assented. And Amaric was the Grand Master of the Knights Templar in England.
Wow.
Now, what we have here in William Marshall, just to summarize, is somebody who was loyal to five kings, who went over to the Holy Land from his perspective. Somebody who ended up, maybe for political purposes or perhaps was already sympathetic, someone who remained loyal to John, who influenced him to say, here's this democratic freedom, perhaps. He wouldn't have phrased it like that. But here is this document. You are known as a tyrant, and tyrants must be dealt with. But here's a piece of paper. I'd suggest that you sign it. Now, whether he said on behalf of my brother knights, unfortunately, that is lost to history. But yes,
the thing, the Magna Carta was obviously a great document that lives on today. But the thing that jumped out at me was when you started reading was no free man.
Well, this is why in England we don't have a history of slaves, because the law doesn't recognize that right. We have wage slaves, don't get me wrong, but we most certainly don't have slavery. We were quite happy to import.
You did have, though.
Well, we had serfs up until Magna Carta. We then started to sell people and drop them off in our colonies.
Right.
You know, but just to conclude with William Marshall, and not to, escape some of his actions and all this, he was known as a formidable warrior. In fact, winning many victories in France against Philip II, in England, also at the siege of Lincoln, and all of this. He was known as a formidable knight. In fact, his presence was such that we can associate him with the Templars. If Bannockburn is anything to go by, or the rumours of knights turning up there all those a century later, and saw the cowering of the English forces at that battle, almost certainly the case was true for William Marshall. And I suppose the sort of the rest of other than his physical stamina and his ferocity as a fighting machine, he also was responsible for negotiating the peace treaty between France and England around the early 13th century, around 1217. And so he occupied, ultimately, the title of Lord Regent of England, Earl of Pembroke, died at the age of 73, and was buried, as I say, he passed away in Oxford, as a Knight of the Temple at Temple Church. And when we think of chivalry and that code, really what we're thinking about is William Marshall. Lots to digest, but
and that takes us right up to the end and beyond. So thank you so much for joining us again, James. I hope to see you back sooner rather than later. And thanks to everybody for listening and watching tonight. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you to our producer, Bill. Good night.
Cheers, Bill. Bye.